candidate for the 27th District, U.S. House of Representatives. Mr. Michoud.
Thanks, Dennis. A little feedback here. As he said, I'm Ed Michoud. I'm the third candidate for this congressional district. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from. I got into this race, really started 2 years ago, and I got into it because I was concerned about the direction this country was going, and our existing Congress was taking us downhill very rapidly. I started out just trying to be a person to get people involved, get them talking. Cameron County particularly is politically pretty apathetic. And I was trying to get people to wake up, get involved, and out of that, we would have a candidate rise up and take the lead that we could support. Well, I probably underestimated the apathy because we didn't get a candidate rise up. But in all my stirring of the pot, Mr. Fred Drew, who is the chairman of the Libertarian Party down here, said, "You're the man that's going to run." Well, it took several months and a lot of consulting with my wife, talking to other people around the district before I agreed to accept the nomination, and that's why I'm here now. Mr. Solomon Ortiz, our incumbent, has forgotten what his job is. He's been there 28 years. He listens more to special interests and party leadership than he does to you, the constituents of the 27th District. He gives you a lot. He says he gives you a lot. He takes credit for more than he really does. And there are people who down here who want to be in a nanny state, and they're going to vote to keep him in there. But those numbers are going downhill rapidly as people become more and more concerned. Now, I've got a Republican competitor in this race also. When he was asked by the League of Women Voters in Corpus Christi to write out his description of his qualifications for the job, for a voter guide they were publishing this month, and these are his words. He's over 25 years old, he's a U.S. citizen, and he's a resident of Texas. That's the sum of his qualifications and experience for this job. And those were his words, not mine. Now, he is also, he'll tell you, he is a lawyer, but he got tired of being a lawyer and quit, practicing law after a little while. And that kind of shows a little bit of his background and character because he was a trust fund baby and has never had to work a day in his life and lacks a sense of commitment to what he's doing. And then you got this guy. I'm not a politician. I've never been a politician. I have no interest in becoming a career politician. I'm a combat decorated Air Force colonel, retired. I then went to work in the private sector, worked for a Fortune 500 company, and ended up as an executive in that company. And I have a master's degree in management. My pledge is to work for you, not for any special interest and not for party leadership. When I go to Washington, they only know 3 letters in Washington, R, D, and I. I'm not up there as a libertarian. I'm not up there as a Constitutionalist Party member. I'm up there as an independent from the Libertarian Party, but I'm independent. And I'm contending we need much more independence in Washington. We need to branch out so that we have a break in this gridlock we've got in Congress. I was very fortunate in that I've been endorsed by the National Liberty Candidate Organization. That endorsement was given because they recognize my stance and position on the liberties of people, on constitutional government, on sound money, on free market principles, and a rational national foreign policy. I'm very proud of those. And I will support all of those steps when I'm in Washington. I'm for much smaller government. It has gone way too far, too fast, and for every new job in the government sector, it's taking away the resources that should be dedicated in the private sector for private sector jobs. Those government sector people do not create money, wealth, prosperity for this country. They don't create jobs for this country. All they do is add to the bureaucratic maze and the overregulation that people are being forced to see. I'm for severely cutting back on spending. We have to have a sound fiscal responsibility in Congress that is created by spending cuts, not by increased taxation of the people. Thank you. There are a few things in the way of congressional operations that I will absolutely support. One is the Enumerated Powers Act that has been brought up to Congress every year, I think, for about the last 8 sessions of Congress, and it doesn't get out of committee to be voted on the floor. I will co-sponsor that when it is reinitiated next year, and it will be reinitiated, and I'll be glad to sign on for a co-sponsor. Now, what that means, if you aren't familiar with it, it means that every piece of legislation that is presented in Congress must have a constitutional thread. How is this justified in our Constitution? And if it's not, you can't process that legislation. I'm for much smaller bills, no more bundling lots of things all into one big bill, because it becomes comprehensive and incomprehensible. So let's have legislation that addresses one problem at a time, so it's clear, it's understood, and it's well defined. I'm for term limits, but practically speaking, we're not going to get an amendment for term limits out of Congress because we're hitting them right where most of them live. So I'm in favor of more people activity to enforce term limits through the ballot box. That's the best way to do it. Another thing that I am for, and I know it's probably not, realistic to suggest it, but I think in the area of fiscal responsibility and getting our house back in order, Congress should set an example. They should set an example by saying no more congressional raises if the last year was a deficit year. The only way Congress can get a raise in their salary is if they have a balanced budget and they perform to a balanced budget, and then that raise is limited to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. A lot of you are, and like myself, are in Social Security. We're not getting a raise in Social Security again because it's tied to the CPI. The CPI is not a realistic indicator of the cost of living. All of you that go to the store to buy groceries know that cost of living is way up, but the CPI is way down. If we tie salaries to CPI, maybe they'll straighten that out. Yes. So that's really where I'm coming from, folks. I would appreciate you considering me for a vote. If you don't know enough about me, please look up my website, edmishu.com, and learn more and ask questions. And I know that new congressmen are said to be looking at #1 re-election when they go in there. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look at discharging my congressional responsibilities to the best of my ability. And if I do that well, re-election will take care of itself. And if I don't do that well, I wouldn't ask you to re-elect me anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Now this is an extreme honor for me. This is Mr. Larry Pratt from Gun Owners America, the Executive Vice President, and a very good speaker. Please pay attention.
Thank you. Dennis, thank you so much for putting this together, for inviting me down here. I'd like to, shame the media is not still here, because I like to say something that kind of makes their head explode. We were at an armed rally on April 19, which the media thinks is Timothy McVeigh Day. Actually, since they're all graduates of government schools, they're not likely to know that that's the day that most Americans recognize was the beginning of our War of Independence at Lexington and Concord. And the idea of a bunch of men running around like many of you are with guns is very troubling to the ruling class. Well, it was troubling to George III also. We had the rally, and I was given the honor of speaking to the group, and I pointed out with something I want to say today. We are in a war. And the other side knows that we're in a war. I'm not sure, maybe our side is beginning to come to an awareness of the fact that we're in a war, but they started the war, and this war is total. They want our guns, obviously, as did George III when he banned the importation of guns and ammo and other things of the sort. They want our money, clearly. Their only solution to a problem is to raise taxes. They want our land. There's increasing regulation and restriction on what we can do with our land. They want our kids. They don't want us to have any input whatsoever in their education. And basically, they want everything we have. You can't even start a business in this country without asking for some bureaucrat for permission. And it strikes me that it's a little odd that since they're our employees and we're the sovereign, we the people have established this government, and we're the boss, but they don't look at it that way. Hopefully they're going to get their first lesson in what I think is a decade-long fight to restore the republic. We're not even if we like the direction of many of the elections that occur this Tuesday coming, we're not going to be able to get at all of them that need to be gotten at, and there's going to be some that are going to forget, even if they knew when they went in, and we're going to have to go deal with them all over again. This is something that's going to require us to be vigilant for a long, long time, because that's what it's going to take to restore our republic. The idea that we have to ask for a bureaucrat's permission, or perhaps some elected official permission